I thought burying my parents was the end of the tragedy, but the real blow came 24 hours later, when my older sister changed the locks on the family home. With a rehearsed look of pity, Lauren told me the house was hers now. I left with nothing but a suitcase and a humiliation I could not explain, never suspecting that 5 years later, a single forgotten lien notice would prove her entire story was a lie. The drive back to my hometown took 4 hours, but the distance felt more like a decade. I had been living 2 states away, building a life that felt separate from the slow, suffocating gravity of the house I grew up in. But the phone call from my sister Lauren had collapsed that distance in a single second. Mom and Dad were gone, not one after the other, not with the grace of time in between, but together, in a hydroplaning accident on a rainy Tuesday that turned the world gray. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. My black dress hung in the back seat, wrapped in plastic, swaying with every turn of the highway. I had not been there to identify the bodies. Lauren had handled it. I had not been there to pick the casket spray or choose the hymns. Lauren had handled that too. Every time I tried to interject, to offer help, to ask for a delay so I could get my feet on the ground, Lauren would cut me off with a voice that was terrifyingly steady. "We have it under control, Naomi," she had said. "You just get here safely." The "we" in that sentence did a lot of heavy lifting. It implied a team, a consensus, a group of responsible adults from which I was implicitly excluded. By the time I pulled into the gravel lot of the funeral home, the visitation was already starting. The air smelled of damp earth and excessive lilies. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes were red-rimmed, my hair pulled back in a severe bun that felt tight against my scalp. I looked like I was holding myself together with staples and glue. I walked inside, expecting to find my sister falling apart, expecting that we would collapse into each other and finally be just 2 sisters who had lost everything. That was the script I had in my head. That was how families worked in the movies. Instead, I found Lauren standing by the entrance to the viewing room, looking immaculate. She wore a black dress that fit her perfectly, her hair blow-dried into a smooth golden helmet. She was shaking hands with the pastor, nodding solemnly, playing the role of the matriarch as if she had been rehearsing for it for years. "Naomi," she said when she saw me. She did not hug me. She reached out and squeezed my forearm, a gesture that felt less like comfort and more like a restraint. "You made it. Good. The traffic can be terrible this time of day." "I made it." I managed to choke out. "Lauren, I am so sorry. I should have been here sooner." "It is fine," she said, smoothing a wrinkle on my sleeve that did not exist. "We managed. Go put your bag in the cloakroom. People are starting to line up." I drifted into the room like a ghost. The casket was closed. I was grateful for that. At least, I stood near the front, unsure of my place. Usually, the immediate family stood in a receiving line, a united front against the tide of well-wishers, but Lauren had positioned herself at the head of the room, flanked by her husband, creating a wall of competence that I could not seem to breach. I tried to greet Mrs. Gable, a neighbor who had lived next to us for 20 years. She had taught me how to deadhead petunias. "Mrs. Gable," I said, reaching for her hand. She took it, but her eyes slid past me to where Lauren was holding court. "Oh, Naomi," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "It is just tragic, just tragic. Your poor sister." I nodded. "I know. We are all devastated." Mrs. Gable patted my hand and pulled away. "She has been through so much, you know, taking care of everything. You are lucky she is so strong." The words landed like a small stone in my shoe. Taking care of everything. I had called Mom every Sunday. I had visited on holidays. I had sent money when the roof needed patching last year. I was not absent. I was just distant. But in the geography of a small town, distance was the same as abandonment. As the evening wore on, the pattern repeated itself. Neighbors would offer me a tight, polite smile, the kind you give to a distant cousin you do not quite recognize. And then they would gravitate toward Lauren. They touched her shoulder. They brought her casseroles. They looked at her with a mixture of pity and reverence. I stood 3 feet away, holding a styrofoam cup of lukewarm coffee, feeling like an intruder at my own parents' funeral. When the service ended, I walked over to Lauren. "I am going to head to the house," I said. "I am exhausted." "I will see you there?" Lauren paused, looking up from a list of thank you notes she was already organizing. "Actually, Naomi, tonight is going to be chaotic. Mark and I have to move some things around for the wake reception tomorrow. It might be better if you stayed at the motel off the highway tonight, just so you get some real rest." I blinked. "The motel?" "Lauren, that is my childhood home. My room is still there. It is full of boxes." She said quickly, "Too much clutter. Mom became a bit of a hoarder at the end. You would not be comfortable. I already booked the room for you. It is paid for." She handed me a key card before I could argue. It felt final. I was too tired to fight, too drained to question why my mother, who vacuumed her curtains weekly, would have suddenly become a hoarder. I took the key card. "Okay," I said, "but I'm coming over first thing in the morning, before the burial. I want to spend some time in the house." "Come after 9, Lauren said, turning back to her husband. "We will be up by then." I slept fitfully in the motel room, the air conditioner rattling like a dying engine. I dreamed of the house. I dreamed of the way the front porch steps creaked under the weight of grocery bags, the smell of the cedar closet in the hallway, the specific quality of light that hit the kitchen table at 7 in the morning, in my dream. I was trying to open the front door, but the knob was burning hot, searing my palm. I woke up at 6. I could not wait until 9. I needed to be there. I needed to smell my father's coffee and see my mother's handwriting on the calendar. I showered, dressed in my black funeral clothes, and drove to the house. The morning mist was still clinging to the oak trees when I pulled into the driveway. The house looked exactly as it always had. The white paint was peeling slightly around the window frames. The gutters needed clearing, but it was solid. It was home. Mark's truck was in the driveway, along with Lauren's sedan. I walked up the steps, my heart hammering a strange, uneven rhythm. I reached for the spare key that had been hidden inside the plastic rock in the flower planter since 1998. The rock was gone. That was the first tremor. I frowned, checking the dirt, thinking maybe a squirrel had knocked it over. Nothing. Just smooth, undisturbed soil. I stood up and went to the door. I had my own key on my keychain, a brass copy I had carried with me through 3 apartments and 2 breakups. I slid it into the lock. It did not turn. I jiggled it. I pulled it out and tried again, forcing it slightly. The metal grated against metal. A harsh, unforgiving sound in the quiet morning. The lock was stiff, unyielding. It was new. The brass plate around the deadbolt was shiny, scratch-free. I took a step back, staring at the door. They had changed the locks. My parents had been dead for 4 days, and the locks were already changed. I knocked, first softly, then harder. "Lauren!" I called out. "Lauren, let me in!" It took 2 minutes. I heard footsteps, not the hurried scuff of someone rushing to answer, but a slow, deliberate cadence. The door opened. Lauren stood there. She was already fully dressed, wearing a navy blue dress and pearls, her makeup flawless. She did not look like someone who had just lost her parents. She looked like a real estate agent preparing for an open house. In her hand, she held a thick manila folder. "Naomi," she said, "I told you to come after 9. My key does not work," I said, my voice sounding thin and high. "The spare key is gone. Lauren, why doesn't my key work?" Lauren stepped out onto the porch and pulled the door shut behind her. The click of the latch echoed like a gunshot. She did not invite me in. "We need to talk," she said. "Talk about what?" "Open the door. I want to go to my room." Lauren sighed, a long, weary exhalation that suggested I was being incredibly difficult. "Naomi, listen to me. Things have changed. Mom and Dad made some updates to their estate planning in the last year. They did not want to worry you, knowing how unsettled your life has been. My life was not unsettled. I was a copy editor for a textbook company. I paid my bills. I had a 401k. but looking at Lauren, with her pearls and her manila folder, I felt suddenly small and chaotic. "What are you talking about?" I asked. Lauren tapped the folder. "The house, the assets. They transferred the title to me about 6 months ago. It was a strategy to protect the assets from potential medical bills. But it was also what they wanted. They knew I was the one here, taking care of the maintenance, handling the day-to-day. They wanted to make sure the house stayed in the family. It is in the family." I said, "I am the family." Lauren gave me a sad smile. "You are 2 states away. Naomi. You have your own life. Mom and Dad did not want to burden you with the upkeep of a property you never visit." I felt the blood drain from my face. Burden me? Mom told me, specifically, at Christmas. She said, "This house will always be both of yours." She said it while we were drying dishes. Mom said a lot of things, Lauren said, her voice dropping to a soothing, patronizing register. She was confused at the end. You know that. She was not confused. I snapped. She was 68. She did not have dementia. Lauren opened the folder. She pulled out a document. It was a deed transfer. I saw the stamp of the county clerk. I saw the date. From 6 months ago, I saw my parents' signatures at the bottom. They looked shaky, but they were there. "And look," Lauren said, pulling out another sheet. "This is the breakdown. You are taken care of. Naomi, there is a personal bequest for you, a cash settlement, $10,000. $10,000? The house was worth $400,000. Easily. It is what was liquid," Lauren said. "The rest is tied up in the property, which is now solely in my name. The lawyer, Mr. Henderson, has all the paperwork filed. It is done." I stared at the paper. The words swam before my eyes. Grantor, grantee, quitclaim. "This is not right," I whispered. "This is not what they wanted." "Naomi, please," Lauren said, stepping closer. "Do not make this harder than it is. Do not cause a scene on the day of their burial. They wanted you to have a nest egg. They wanted me to handle the estate because I am the one who is good with these things. You know you get overwhelmed. You know you are not financial." I am not financial. I managed a department budget, but the way she said it, with such absolute certainty, made me doubt my own reality. "I want to see the will." I said, "There is no will to probate," Lauren said smoothly. "Since the assets were transferred before death, the estate is settled. That is the beauty of it. No court, no hassle, just closure." She tried to hand me the paper regarding the $10,000. I did not take it. I looked at the closed door behind her. "Can I just go in?" I asked, my voice cracking. "I just want my things, my high school yearbooks, the letters in the attic." Lauren hesitated. "The house is a mess. Naomi, Mark is moving things around. We are painting the guest room to stage it for, well, we are just cleaning up." "Stage it?" I asked. "Are you selling it?" "We have not decided." She lied. I could tell she was lying. Her left eye twitched, a tiny spasm she had had since she was 12. "But, look, I will pack up your things. I will bring them to you. I want to get them myself." "Naomi, stop. You are hysterical." "I am not hysterical," I yelled. A bird flew out of the oak tree, startled by the noise. The silence that followed was thick and heavy. "This is exactly why they did it this way," Lauren said softly. She looked at me with disappointment. "Because you cannot handle the emotions. Go back to the motel. Get change for the burial. I will mail you the check." She turned around, put the key in the lock, and opened the door just wide enough to slip inside. I saw a glimpse of the hallway. The rug was gone. The walls looked bare. Then the door clicked shut, and the deadbolt slid home. I stood on the porch for 10 minutes. I raised my fist to pound on the wood, but my hand stopped in midair. The shame was sudden and total. If I banged on the door, I would be the crazy sister. I would be the unstable one Mrs. Gable whispered about. I would prove Lauren right. I lowered my hand, walked back to my car, and drove away. The rest of the day was a blur of black umbrellas and rain. I stood at the gravesite, watching the caskets lower into the ground, feeling a detachment that scared me. I looked at Lauren, standing with her husband, receiving hugs, dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief. I felt nothing for her. Not hate, not yet. Just a cold, hard numbness. I tried to call the lawyer immediately after the reception. I sat in my car in the motel parking lot, the engine running to keep the heat on. I looked up the number for Henderson Associates. A receptionist answered on the second ring. Henderson and Associates. How may I direct your call? I need to speak to Mr. Henderson. I said, My name is Naomi Patterson. It is about my parents' estate. There was a pause, then the sound of typing. Oh, yes, Ms. Patterson. I am afraid Mr. Henderson is in a meeting for the rest of the day. It is urgent. I said, My sister is telling me the house was transferred. I need to understand what happened. I can take a message. The voice said, polite and robotic. I left a message. I called again an hour later. He was out to lunch. I called at 4 o'clock. He had left for the day. At 5:15, my phone pinged with an email. It was from the firm's general inbox. Dear Ms. Patterson, please be advised that the estate of Robert and Mary Patterson has been settled in accordance with the documents executed prior to their passing. As there are no remaining assets subject to probate, our representation is concluded. The personal bequest mentioned by the executrix will be dispersed in due course. Regards, Office of Henderson Associates. No explanation, no offer to meet, just a door slamming shut in my face, digital and absolute. I checked out of the motel that night because I could not bear to be alone in that room anymore, and I certainly could not afford to stay there indefinitely. I had burned through my savings to get here, taking emergency leave from work. I called Sarah, a friend from high school I hadn't seen in 6 years. We had exchanged Christmas cards, but we were not close. Naomi? She said, sounding surprised. I heard about your parents. I am so sorry. I need a place to crash, I said, hating the wobble in my voice. Just for a night or two, until I sort things out with the house. There was a hesitation, a beat of silence that lasted too long. Oh, sure, Sarah said. I mean, the spare room is kind of a storage closet right now. But if you do not mind sleeping on the pullout in the den, I do not mind, I said. Staying with Sarah was a mistake. She was kind. But she looked at me with that same pity I had seen at the funeral. She asked questions I could not answer. Why are you not staying at the big house? Why is Lauren staying there and not you? I told her it was plumbing issues. I lied because the truth, that my sister had locked me out, sounded insane. It sounded like something a junkie would say to explain why they were sleeping on a couch. I stayed 2 nights. On the 3rd night, I could tell Sarah's husband was getting annoyed. The house was small, and I was a ghost haunting their living room. I left in the morning, telling them I was going back to the family house. I drove to a park on the edge of town, near the reservoir. I reclined the driver's seat of my 10-year-old sedan. I draped my funeral coat over me like a blanket. I slept in my car. I woke up with a stiff neck and a mouth that tasted like metal. I watched the sun come up over the water, feeling a profound sense of dislocation. I was 33 years old. I had a degree. I had a life. And here I was, homeless in my hometown, washing my face with a bottle of water in a public restroom. I told myself this was temporary. I told myself I would go back to the city, get a lawyer, and fix this. It was just a misunderstanding, a clerical error. Lauren was grieving. And grief made people do strange things. Once the shock wore off, she would be reasonable. We would sit down, look at the numbers, and she would apologize. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it began to sprout that afternoon. I was sitting in a coffee shop, using their Wi-Fi to look for cheap return flights, when my phone buzzed with a notification from my bank app. Credit alert. New inquiry. Detected. I frowned and opened the app. It was a hard pull on my credit report. The source was First National Bank of Oak Creek. Oak Creek, that was here, my hometown. I had not banked with First National since I was 18. I had no accounts there. I had not applied for a loan. My stomach dropped. A hard inquiry meant someone was trying to open credit in my name. or someone was using my social security number to co-sign something. I stared at the screen. The inquiry was dated yesterday. I dialed Lauren's number. My hands were shaking so hard, I almost dropped the phone. She answered on the first ring, her voice calm, devoid of the jagged edges that were cutting me apart. "Hello? Lauren," I said, "why is there a credit inquiry from First National on my report?" There was a silence on the other end. A silence that had weight. "I do not know what you are talking about." "Naomi, do not lie to me," I said, and my voice finally found its anchor. "I am looking at it. First National. Yesterday. Did you try to use my name for something? For the house? Naomi, you are sounding paranoid." "I am not paranoid. I am homeless." "Lauren, I slept in my car last night because you locked me out of our parents' house. And now my credit is pinging? What are you doing?" There was a sigh, a long, disappointed sound. "Please do not do this," Lauren said. "Mom and Dad did not want chaos. That is all they asked for. Peace. And here you are, accusing me of federal crimes, screaming at me, causing drama. This is exactly why they put me in charge." She was twisting it. She was taking my valid fear and turning it into proof of my instability. "I want my things." I said, "I am leaving. I cannot stay here and fight you anymore. I am going back to the city. But I want my things." "Fine," Lauren said. "I put a box on the porch. Come and get it, but do not try the door. The alarm is set." She hung up. I drove to the house one last time. The box was there. A generic cardboard moving box, taped shut. It sat on the welcome mat like a package delivered to the wrong address. I did not try the door. I did not look in the windows. I picked up the box. It felt light, too light. I carried it to the trunk of my car and cut the tape with my house key, the key that no longer worked. Inside, there was a jumble of items: my high school diploma, a stuffed bear I had when I was 5, some paperback books I had left behind, a few sweaters. I dug to the bottom. Where were Dad's letters? Our father had written 50 letters to our mother during the war. They were kept in a shoebox wrapped in velvet. I had asked for them specifically. They were the only thing I truly cared about. They were not there. Where was the photo album? The red one, with the magnetic pages, where Mom had written funny captions under every picture? Gone. I looked at the items in the box. They were generic. They were the things you would give to a stranger to prove they had existed, without giving them any of the soul of the person. Lauren had curated my history. She had decided what I was allowed to remember. I looked back at the house. The curtains were drawn. I knew she was in there. I knew she was watching me through the slit in the drapes. I could go up there and pound on the door. I could throw a rock through the window. I could call the police. But Mrs. Gable was walking her dog across the street. She stopped and watched me. If I screamed, she would see. If the police came, the whole town would know that Naomi Patterson had finally cracked. Lauren would win. She would have the narrative. My unstable sister, crashing the funeral, demanding money, screaming on the lawn. I did not scream. I closed the trunk. I got in the car. I drove out of town without looking back. I had $10,000 promised in the mail, a box of sweaters, and a hole in my chest where my family used to be. I told myself I was leaving to heal. I told myself I was walking away from the toxicity. I did not know then that I wasn't walking away. I was just retreating to higher ground to wait for the flood. The drive back was silent. No radio, no podcasts, just the hum of the tires and the realization that the credit inquiry was still there, glowing on my phone screen like a warning flare. First National Bank. Why would she need my credit? If she had the house, if she had the assets, if everything was settled, why did she need me? The question circled in my mind, rhythmic and relentless. It was the only thing that kept me from crying. It was the first thread of the rope I would eventually use to hang her, but that would be 5 years later. For now, I was just the sister who didn't get the house, the one who left, the one who lost. I merged onto the interstate and let the distance grow between us, mile by agonizing mile. Moving on was not a clean break. It was a slow, grinding amputation. I moved to a city 2 hours north of where I had been living, a place where the rent was cheaper and the winters were harsher. I needed to disappear, not just from Lauren, but from the version of myself that had stood in that driveway crying over a locked door. I found a studio apartment above a dry cleaner's shop. The air always smelled faintly of heated plastic and chemicals, a sterile scent that I eventually came to associate with safety. I downsized my life with a ruthlessness that scared me. I sold my car, the sedan that had been my bed for that one wretched night, because looking at the back seat made my skin crawl with phantom shame. I took the bus. I sold the furniture I couldn't carry. I kept the box of sweaters Lauren had allowed me to take, but I didn't open it. It sat in the corner of the room like an unexploded ordnance. I took extra shifts at a textbook publishing house, doing freelance copy editing until my eyes burned and the words swam on the screen. I needed the money, yes, but mostly I needed the exhaustion. If I was tired enough, I didn't dream about the house. If I was tired enough, I didn't hear the sound of the deadbolt sliding home in my head. But grief is not linear, and it is not polite. It didn't care about my work schedule. It would catch me in the produce aisle of the grocery store, staring at a bag of red apples, and suddenly I would be 8 years old, standing in the kitchen with my mother, peeling apples for a pie. The smell of cinnamon would fill my nose, so real it made me dizzy, and then the memory would curdle. I would remember that the kitchen was gone. The apples were gone. The mother I knew was gone, replaced by the woman Lauren described, a woman who secretly signed over her legacy and left me out in the cold. The question was a fishhook caught in the back of my throat. How did I become the outsider in my own family? I had been the good student. I had been the one who called. I had been the one who never asked for money. How had the narrative flipped so completely that I was the villain? 3 months in, I started seeing a therapist. Her name was Dr. Evans, and her office was a small, beige room that looked out over a parking lot. I paid her on a sliding scale, handing over cash at the end of every session because I didn't want a paper trail on my insurance that Lauren might somehow see. Paranoia had become my roommate. It took 4 sessions before I could even say Lauren's name without choking. She isn't mean. I told Dr. Evans, twisting a tissue around my finger until the circulation cut off. That is the thing. She is not a movie villain. She does not yell. She helps people. Everyone in town thinks she is a saint. Doctor? Evans nodded, her face neutral. How did she handle conflict when you were children? I thought back, trying to find a moment of violence, a moment of screaming. I couldn't find one. She didn't fight, I said slowly. She fixed things. If I scraped my knee, she was the one with the bandage before Mom even knew I was hurt. If I got a bad grade, she would tell me how to hide the report card, or how to tell Dad in a way that wouldn't make him angry. She managed the information. Doctor, Evans suggested. Yes, I said. She managed the emotional temperature of the house. We dug deeper, and the pattern emerged like a fossil brushed free of dust. Lauren had always been the gatekeeper. When I was 16 and got caught drinking a beer, Lauren didn't tell on me. She sat me down and told me how disappointed Mom would be, how fragile Mom's heart was, how I was being selfish. She made me feel so small, so reckless, that I grounded myself. She didn't have to punish me. She just handed me the shame and watched me put it on. It was never overt cruelty. I realized, staring at the beige carpet, it was constant correction. It was a quiet leash. She had spent 30 years convincing me that I was the volatile one, the emotional one, the one who needed to be handled. And when the funeral came, she just cashed in on the story she had been writing since we were kids. I left that session feeling lighter, but also angrier. Understanding the trap didn't get me out of it, but at least I could see the bars. That anger gave me the energy to make the first phone call. I didn't call Lauren. I called the county clerk's office in my hometown. I sat at my small kitchen table, a notepad in front of me, my heart hammering against my ribs. County clerk, this is Brenda, a voice rasped. Hi, I said, trying to sound professional. My name is Naomi Patterson. I am looking for information regarding a property transfer for Robert and Mary Patterson. The address is 42 Maple Street. What kind of information? Brenda asked. She sounded bored, which helped. I just want to know when the deed was transferred, the date of the filing. Hold on. I heard the click of a keyboard. The silence stretched for a minute. Then two. I drew jagged spirals on my notepad. Here it is, Brenda said. Quitclaim deed. Grantors. Robert and Mary Patterson. Grantee Lauren Miller. Recorded on October 14th of last year. My pen stopped moving. October 14th. Are you sure? I asked. I am looking right at it. Hun? October 14th. I thanked her and hung up, my hand trembling. October 14th. I opened my laptop and pulled up my old calendar. I scrolled back, searching for that week. I found it. Mom, ICU admission. Pneumonia. My mother had been in the hospital on October 14th. She had been on a ventilator for 2 days prior, and although she had been extubated by the 14th, she was weak, confused, and heavily medicated. I remembered calling Lauren that day. Lauren had told me, "She is resting. Don't come down yet. You will just overwhelm her. I am handling it." How could my mother have signed a legal document transferring the primary asset of her life while she was recovering from respiratory failure in an ICU step-down unit? And Dad? Dad had been at her bedside every hour. He was terrified of hospitals. He wouldn't even sign a credit card receipt without reading it twice. I called the clerk back 5 minutes later. Hi, Brenda. It is Naomi again. I'm sorry to bother you. Is there any way I can see a copy of that deed? Can you email it to me? There was a pause. The boredom in Brenda's voice was replaced by a rigid, bureaucratic tone. I cannot email certified documents to just anyone. She said, I am not just anyone. I said, my voice rising. I am their daughter. The deed is public record, Brenda said. But if you want a copy, you need to come in person or submit a formal request form with a check for the copy fees. And if you are contesting the validity, well, that is a legal matter. We do not handle that, but I just want to see the signature. I pleaded. I just want to see who notarized it. I cannot help you over the phone. Ma'am, Brenda said, you need to follow the protocol. She hung up. I sat there, the humiliation burning my cheeks. I was begging a stranger for proof of my own parents' actions. I was asking for a scrap of paper to prove that my reality was true. And I was being told to fill out a form. Lauren had the house, the keys, the furniture, the memories. I had a dial tone. 2 weeks later, the envelope arrived. It was thick, creamy paper with the return address of Henderson Associates, the same law firm that had brushed me off with an email. I opened it standing up, afraid that if I sat down I wouldn't be able to get back up. Inside was a check. It was printed on blue security paper. The amount was exactly $10,000.00. The memo line read, Final distribution, estate of R.M. Patterson. There was a letter attached. It was brief, written in legalese that felt like a slap in the face. Dear Ms. Patterson, enclosed. Please find the personal bequest directed by the executrix of the estate. By cashing this instrument, you acknowledge receipt of all funds due to you and agree that the estate is fully and finally settled. No further claims may be made. Sincerely, Alan Henderson, Esquire. I stared at the check. $10,000. To me, in that moment, it was a fortune. It was 6 months of rent. It was a new car. It was therapy for a year. It was breathing room. I could pay off my credit card. I could buy a winter coat that actually zipped all the way up. All I had to do was sign my name. I picked up a pen. I flipped the check over to the endorsement line on the back. Sign here. The gray letters whispered, just sign it and be done. Take the money. Walk away. Lauren wins. But you survive. I uncapped the pen. The tip hovered over the paper, but then I looked at the memo line again. Final distribution. If I signed this, I was agreeing to their version of the story. I was agreeing that my parents had only valued me at $10,000. I was agreeing that the house, the letters, the history, it was all Lauren's by right. It felt like a bribe. It felt like hush money. I put the cap back on the pen. I didn't have the luxury of pride, but I had a surplus of stubbornness. I pinned the check to the corkboard above my desk. I didn't shred it. I wasn't stupid. I might need it if I was starving, but I didn't cash it. That choice cost me. I ate instant noodles for dinner for 3 weeks straight. I walked to work in the rain because I couldn't afford a cab. Every time I looked at that check, I felt a pang of hunger and a flare of anger. But it was my anger. It was the one thing Lauren hadn't managed to take away. Time moved differently in the exile of my new life. Days bled into weeks. The seasons changed from the gray slush of winter to the tentative green of spring. I kept working. I kept going to therapy. I kept the box of sweaters closed. 6 months after the funeral, I had to fly to a conference for the publishing house. It was a rare opportunity, and my boss had insisted I go. The layover was in Chicago, a sprawling, chaotic hub of noise and motion. I was sitting at a gate, eating a stale bagel, watching people rush by. I wasn't looking for anyone. I was just trying to stay awake. Naomi? The voice stopped me mid-chew. I looked up. Standing there, holding a floral carry-on bag, was Mrs. Albright. She was a fixture at my parents' church, the kind of woman who organized the bake sales and knew everyone's baptism dates. Mrs. Albright, I said, scrambling to stand up, brushing crumbs off my slacks. Hi. Oh, honey, she said, her face softening into that familiar mask of pity. I haven't seen you since the service. How are you doing? I am doing okay, I lied. Just working. Traveling for a conference. She nodded, looking at me closely. You look thin. Naomi, are you eating? I am fine. Really? Well, that is good to hear, she said. We miss you at church. We pray for you and Lauren every Sunday. It has been such a hard year for your family. Yes, I said. It has. She shifted her bag on her shoulder, looking past me for a moment, then leaned in closer, dropping her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. You know, I was just thinking about your father the other day. I saw a man who looked just like him near the newsstand. It gave me such a start. I forced a smile. He had that effect on people. He was a good man. Mrs. Albright said, a worried man. Though, at the end, the smile froze on my face. Worried? Oh, you know, he kept things close to the vest, but he talked to my husband, Frank, sometimes, after the men's breakfast. She paused, checking her watch. I held my breath. He was just so upset about that loan, she said, shaking her head. He kept saying, I am going to fix it. Frank, I am going to get us out from under it. It just broke my heart to see him so stressed. I am just glad Lauren was able to get everything settled for you girls. My heart stopped. It literally skipped a beat, a hollow thump in my chest. Loan? I said. My voice sounded very far away. What loan? Mrs. Albright? She blinked, realizing she might have said too much. Oh, I do not know the details. Honey, just business things, I suppose. You know how men are. He just mentioned a loan he regretted. Something about the house, I think. But listen to me gossiping. I have to catch my flight to Phoenix. She patted my arm. You take care, Naomi. Call your sister. Family is everything. She walked away, merging into the stream of travelers. I stood there in the middle of the terminal, the noise of the airport fading into a dull roar. The house, a loan he regretted. Lauren had told me everything was paid off. She had said, Mom and Dad wanted to protect the assets. She had said the house was free and clear, transferred to her to avoid probate. If the house was paid off, why was Dad worried about a loan? I didn't get on my plane. I did. Physically. I sat in seat 14B and buckled my seatbelt, but my mind was back in that conversation. My parents didn't believe in debt. They had burned their mortgage paperwork in the fireplace in 2010 when they made the final payment. They paid cash for cars. The idea of my father taking out a loan on the house, a loan that stressed him out, was impossible. Unless he was desperate, or unless he didn't do it. When I got back to my apartment, I didn't just unpack. I started a war room. I went to an office supply store and bought a fresh notebook, a pack of highlighters, and a file box. I sat down at my desk and opened a blank spreadsheet on my laptop. I started documenting. I wrote down everything I knew. October 14th. Deed transfer. Mom in ICU. Dad distressed. Funeral week. Locks changed. Document folder produced. Post-funeral. Credit inquiry from First National Bank. 6 months later. Mrs. Albright mentions a loan and Dad wanting to fix it. I logged the dates of my phone calls to the lawyer. I logged the date the check arrived. I logged the conversation with the clerk. It was tedious. It was boring. It was incredibly lonely. There is no montage music for staring at a computer screen at 2 a.m, cross-referencing dates on a calendar. There is just back pain and the dry, scratching feeling of eyes that have forgotten how to blink. But as I typed, the chaos in my head began to organize itself into a shape, and the shape was ugly. The timeline didn't match Lauren's story. If the house was transferred in October to protect assets, why would there be a loan involved? A quitclaim deed usually clears the title, or transfers it with existing encumbrances. If there was a loan, Lauren would have had to assume it, or pay it off. I needed to talk to her, but not the way I had before, not screaming, not crying. I waited until Sunday night. I knew she would be home. She always made a roast on Sunday nights. I dialed the number. Hello? Her voice was warm, smelling of gravy and contentment. Hi. Lauren, it is Naomi. A pause, then, a slight cooling of the tone. Naomi, hi. I was just thinking about you. We haven't heard from you in months. Did you get the check? I looked at the check pinned to the corkboard. I did. I said, thank you. Good, she said. I'm glad you are being sensible. Lauren, I said, keeping my voice soft, almost meek. I had a question. I ran into Mrs. Albright from church the other day. She mentioned something confusing. She said Dad was worried about a loan on the house right before he died. The silence on the other end was absolute. It wasn't the silence of confusion. It was the silence of a predator assessing a sound in the brush. Mrs. Albright is senile, Lauren said. Her voice was flat. She seemed pretty sharp. I said, she said Dad told Frank he wanted to fix it. Was there a loan? Lauren? Did Dad borrow money? Naomi. Lauren sighed. The sound was heavy with exhausted patience. Why are you doing this? I am just asking. You are not just asking. You are digging. You are obsessing. I told you. Everything is settled. The house is in my name. The debts are paid. Why can you not just be happy that I handled the mess so you didn't have to? I didn't say there was a mess. I said, I just asked about a loan. This isn't healthy. Naomi, she said. Her voice shifted into that terrible, concern-drenched register she used when we were kids. I am really worried about you. You are thousands of miles away. You are alone, and you are fixating on gossip from an old woman at an airport. It sounds manic. I gripped the phone. She was doing it again. She wasn't answering the question. She was diagnosing me. I am not manic. I said, I am just asking for transparency. If there was a loan, can I see the paperwork? Just for my own peace of mind? You don't need paperwork, Lauren said. You need to move on. Mom and Dad would be so heartbroken to see you like this, paranoiac, distrustful. Please, for your own sake, just let it go. Enjoy the money. Build your life. She paused, then delivered the final blow. Do not make me worry that you are unable to care for yourself. Naomi, the threat was subtle, wrapped in velvet. But it was there. If you keep pushing, I will tell everyone you are having a breakdown. I looked at my spreadsheet. I looked at the date, October 14th. I realized then that I couldn't win this conversation. I couldn't win an argument with Lauren because she didn't argue with facts. She argued with reality. She defined the world, and I just lived in it. If I wanted to beat her, I had to stop being her sister. I had to become a stranger. I had to become a problem she couldn't manage with shame. Okay, Lauren, I said. My voice was completely devoid of emotion. I sounded like the receptionist at the law firm, okay? She asked. Suspicious. You are right, I said. I have been stressed. I will let it go. Good, she said, relief leaking into her voice. That is good. Naomi, I just want what is best for you. I know, I said. Goodbye. Lauren. I hung up. I sat in the silence of my apartment. I felt cold. But it was a clarifying cold. I took the check off the corkboard. I looked at it one last time. Then I opened my laptop and created a new folder. I named it Discovery. She wanted me to be unstable? Fine. I would be a ghost. I would be silent. I would be polite. And I would take her apart, piece of paper by piece of paper, until the house of cards she had built on our parents' graves came crashing down. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I didn't know about the notary fraud yet. I didn't know about the hidden equity line, but I knew one thing. Mrs. Albright wasn't senile, and my father never left a debt unpaid. I turned off the light and sat in the dark, watching the city lights blink outside my window. I was ready to begin. 5 years is a long time to hold your breath. On paper. I had exhaled long ago. I had built a life that looked, from the outside, like a triumph of resilience. I had been promoted to senior editor at the publishing house. I had an apartment with a balcony and a dishwasher. I had a circle of friends who knew me as Naomi the editor, Naomi the witty brunch companion, Naomi who didn't talk much about her family because they were distant. I dated a man named Greg for 2 years. He was kind, stable, and taught high school history. We broke up because he wanted to merge our lives, move in together, share finances, meet the parents, and I panicked. I couldn't explain to him that the idea of shared finances made my throat close up. I couldn't explain that I didn't have parents to meet. Only a sister who lived in a fortress of lies 2 states away. So I let him go. I let a lot of things go. I lived a life that was curated, tidy, and utterly fine. But the absence of roots is a phantom pain. It is an ache you cannot massage away. I would wake up on Christmas morning in my quiet apartment, surrounded by friends' cards, and feel a gravitational pull toward a house I was legally barred from entering. I missed the smell of my father's pipe tobacco. I missed the sound of my mother humming in the kitchen. I missed the version of myself that existed before I became a liability to be managed. And then, on a rainy Tuesday in November, the past arrived in my mailbox. It wasn't a dramatic letter. It was a standard business envelope with a yellow forwarding sticker on it. It had been sent to my old address, the apartment I lived in when I first left home, and had slowly, miraculously, clawed its way through the postal system to find me. The return address was for a construction company I didn't recognize, Miller Sons Contracting. I opened it over the recycling bin, expecting a misdirected bill or a marketing flyer. It was a notice of intent to foreclose on Mechanics' lien. I frowned, smoothing the paper out on my kitchen counter. The language was dense and aggressive. It stated that an outstanding balance of $4,500 for roofing repairs and structural reinforcement, performed at 42 Maple Street, remained unpaid. It cited a judgment from 3 years ago. It threatened legal action against the property owners. And listed under property owners/liable parties, right next to Lauren Miller, was my name, Naomi Patterson. I stared at it. My coffee went cold in my hand. I hadn't owned 42 Maple Street for 5 years. Lauren had made that abundantly clear. She had the deed. She had the title. She had the keys. Why was a contractor coming after me for a roof repair I didn't order, on a house I didn't own? I picked up the phone. I didn't call Lauren. I called the number at the bottom of the notice. Miller & Sons. A gruff voice answered. "Hi," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I received a notice in the mail about a lien. Reference number 4599. My name is Naomi Patterson." There was a rustling of papers. "Yeah, Patterson. The roof job. We have been trying to collect on this since 22. I think there is a mistake." I said, "I do not own that house. My sister, Lauren Miller, owns it. The deed was transferred years ago." The man snorted. "Look, lady. I do not care who sleeps there. I care whose name is on the paper. We did the work. We got stiffed. We filed the lien. But why is my name on it? I asked. I never signed a contract with you. Your name is on the title search we ran back when we started the job, he said, and it is listed on the financing paperwork for the draw. The draw? I asked. What draw? The draw from the equity line, he said, sounding impatient. The bank paid the first half. Then the account got frozen or closed or something, and we never got the second half. We have been sending letters for years. I froze. What equity line? The home equity line of credit. He said, the one tied to the property. Look, are you going to pay this, or do we have to proceed with the filing? I hung up. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped the phone on the counter. Home equity. Line of credit. Lauren had told me the house was paid off. She had told me the transfer was to protect assets. She had never mentioned a loan. And she certainly hadn't mentioned my name on a loan. I opened my laptop. I hadn't checked my credit report in a year. I had frozen it after the inquiry 5 years ago. But I had unthawed it recently to apply for my apartment lease. I pulled up the full report. I scrolled past my student loans, my credit card, my car lease, and there it was. Closed account. First National Bank of Oak Creek. Type: revolving home equity line. Status: paid/closed. Opened: October. 5 years ago. Closed: February. 4 years ago. I stared at the dates. The account was opened in October. The same month my mother was in the ICU, the same month the deed was allegedly transferred, and it was closed in February, 2 months after my father died. But the most chilling part was the designation next to my name. Co-borrower. I had not signed a loan application. I had not walked into First National Bank. I had been 2 states away, working a temp job, worrying about my mother's breathing. How could I be a co-borrower on a loan I didn't know existed? I made an appointment with a consumer protection attorney named Mr. Garris. He charged $300 for a consultation, which was a stretch for my budget, but I needed to know if I was crazy. He was a small, weary man with an office that smelled of old paper and peppermint tea. He looked at the credit report. He looked at the lien notice. He looked at me. "You are saying you didn't sign this?" he asked, tapping the credit report. "Never." I said, "I wasn't even in the state." Mr. Garris took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Listen to me, Miss Patterson. Paper trails do not care about family stories. They do not care if your sister is a saint or a sociopath. They only care about signatures and stamps." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means that if your signature is on a document at the bank, you are liable until you prove it is a forgery," he said. "And proving forgery is not like on television. It is expensive. It is ugly. And if you are right, and your sister did this, you are looking at criminal charges, identity theft, bank fraud. Are you ready to send your sister to prison?" I went silent. The thought of Lauren in handcuffs was absurd. Lauren was the PTA treasurer. Lauren was the one who brought casseroles to sick neighbors. "I just want to know the truth." I said, "Then you need the source documents." Mr. Garris said, "You need to see what the bank has. You need to see what the county has. And you can't do that from here. You need to go down there and dig." I didn't tell anyone I was going. I took 3 vacation days. I rented a car because I didn't want to put the miles on my own, and I drove the 4 hours back to the place that had once been home. I didn't stay at the motel near the highway this time. I stayed at a small, run-down motor lodge on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where truckers slept for a few hours before moving on. I wanted to be invisible. Driving through town was like walking through a minefield of memories. I passed the grocery store where my mother used to buy carnations every Friday. Never lilies. "Naomi, lilies are for funerals." I passed the park bench where my dad had held the back of my bicycle seat, swearing he wouldn't let go, until I looked back and saw him standing 50 yards away, cheering. The grief hit me in waves, distinct from the anger. I missed them. I missed the people they were before the end, before the secrets. I wept in the rental car in the parking lot of a pharmacy, sobbing until my ribs ached, mourning not just their deaths, but the death of the trust I had placed in the word family. I had a contact. A friend of a friend back in the city knew a retired paralegal named Bev who still lived in town. She knows where the bodies are buried, my friend had said, and she hates the local lawyers. I met Bev at a diner near the interstate. She was a tiny woman with steel gray hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that missed nothing. She ordered coffee, black, and listened to my story without interrupting. When I finished, she didn't look shocked. She looked resigned. "Probate shortcuts," she said, stirring her coffee. "It happens more than you think. People get desperate. Medical bills pile up. They think, I will just sign this for Mom. She would want me to handle it, and then it snowballs." "But how did she get my name on a loan?" I asked. "How did she transfer the deed if the house was supposed to be mine too?" Bev leaned forward. "Did you ever sign a waiver? A waiver of bond? A consent to transfer?" "No." I said, "I signed nothing. Lauren said there was no probate. She said the assets were transferred before death." Bev raised an eyebrow. "If the assets were transferred, there would be a deed, and if you were an heir, and there was no will, she would need your consent to close the estate without a formal accounting. Unless what? Unless she filed a waiver with your signature on it," Bev said. She pulled a notepad from her purse. "Go to the courthouse tomorrow. Do not go to the clerk you talked to before. Go to the records room in the basement. Look for the probate file for your father. Even if she said there was no probate, there is always a file. There is always a filing of the death certificate. Look for an affidavit of heirship, and look for the deed transfer itself." I went to the courthouse the next morning. The basement smelled of dust and damp concrete. I requested the file for Robert Patterson. The clerk handed me a thin folder. I opened it. There was the death certificate, there was the funeral bill, and there, tucked in the back, was a document titled Waiver of Notice and Consent to Independent Administration. It stated that I, Naomi Patterson, waived my right to receive a formal accounting of the estate and consented to Lauren Miller serving as independent administrator. And at the bottom, above a neat black line, was my signature. I stared at it. It looked like my signature. It had the same loop in the N, the same slant to the P. If I hadn't known better, I would have sworn I wrote it, but I hadn't. I looked at the date next to the signature. October 14th. The same day as the deed transfer. The same day my mother was in the ICU. I turned the page. There was a notary stamp. State of Ohio. County of Oak Creek. Sworn to and subscribed before me this 14th day of October. The notary's name was distinct, Jennifer S. Halloway, and the stamp had a location identifier, the Pack and Ship on 4th Street. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. October 14th, 5 years ago, I pulled out my phone. I had been meticulous about archiving my digital life, a habit born from my job as an editor. I opened my cloud account. I went to the location history. I scrolled back, year by year, until I hit the date. October 14th, 5 years ago. A red dot appeared on the map. It wasn't in Oak Creek. It wasn't even in the same state. The dot was in Chicago. I clicked on the details. O'Hare International Airport, 10:42 a.m. Connecting flight to Denver for work orientation. I had photos from that day. I had a digital boarding pass saved in my email. I was 400 miles away when this document was signed. I looked back at the paper. The Pack and Ship on 4th Street was 2 blocks from the hospital where my mother was dying. The realization washed over me, cold and clarifying. This wasn't just Lauren being bossy. This wasn't just Lauren taking the house because she thought she deserved it more. This was a crime. Lauren had forged my signature. She had taken this document to a notary, someone she probably knew. Someone who didn't ask to see ID, or someone she paid off, and she had stamped it to clear the path. But why? Why take the risk? Why not just bully me into signing it? I probably would have signed it back then. I was weak. I was grieving. If she had said, "Naomi, sign this so we can save the house," I would have done it. I went back to the deed transfer document I had requested. I looked at the timeline again. The deed was transferred to Lauren on October 14th. The home equity line of credit was opened on October 16th. $75,000 was drawn from the equity line on October 18th. My mother died on October 20th. The timeline clicked into place like the tumblers of a safe. Lauren didn't just want the house. She needed the money. She needed $75,000, and she needed it immediately. She couldn't wait for probate. She couldn't wait for me to ask questions. She needed to own the house before Mom died, so she could borrow against it before the estate was frozen. She had used my name as a co-borrower to boost the credit application, forged my consent to clear the title, and drained the equity while our mother was taking her last breaths. And the reason the contractor was suing me now? Because Lauren had run out of money. She had stopped paying the loan. She had stopped paying the contractors. The house, the prize she had stolen, was sinking, and she was letting it drag me down with it. I sat in the basement of the courthouse, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. I felt sick. I felt a physical nausea that made me want to curl up on the linoleum floor. But beneath the sickness, there was something else, a hard, cold rage. For 5 years, I had thought I was the one who had failed. I thought I was the outsider, the weak one, the one who didn't measure up. I looked at the forged signature again. You didn't cast me out. Lauren, I thought, you erased me. You used me as a shield, and then threw me away. I closed the file. I took a picture of the document with my phone. I took a picture of the notary stamp. I walked out of the courthouse and into the bright, blinding sunlight of my hometown. I didn't go to the house. I didn't go to Lauren's. I went back to my rental car and drove to the Pack and Ship on 4th Street. It was still there. I walked inside. A woman was behind the counter, packing a box. I didn't say anything. I just looked at the notary certificate hanging on the wall. Jennifer S. Halloway. I walked back out. I had the leverage. I had the proof. But as I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, I realized that winning wouldn't be simple. Unraveling this meant destroying my sister's life. It meant proving that our parents' final days were marred by fraud. It meant blowing up the memory of the good family forever. I started the engine. I wasn't the little sister anymore. I was the witness for the prosecution, and I was done being quiet. The investigation did not look like a detective movie. There were no corkboards covered in red string, no shadowy meetings in parking garages. It looked like a stack of manila envelopes on my dining room table and a printer that constantly ran out of ink. I returned to the city, to my apartment that smelled of cleaning fluid and silence, and I began the slow, bureaucratic process of dismantling my sister's life. I filed formal records requests for everything. I requested the full deed history for 42 Maple Street going back 10 years. I requested the complete probate filings for my father. Not just the summary sheet I had seen in the basement. I sent a certified letter to the Secretary of State's office regarding the notary, Jennifer S. Halloway, requesting her logbook entries for October 14th of 5 years ago. The waiting was the hardest part. The government moves at the speed of a glacier, indifferent to the burning urgency in my chest. Every time the mail carrier arrived, my heart would hammer a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Each envelope felt like a small explosion, a potential detonation that could destroy the last remnants of the family I thought I knew. The first explosion came in the form of the deed history. I laid the documents out on the floor, arranging them chronologically. I had to step over them to get to the kitchen. Here was the original deed from 1990. When my parents bought the house, here was the satisfaction of mortgage from 2010, when they burned the papers in the fireplace, and then the gap for years. Nothing, just stability. Then, October, the month my mother went into the ICU, the month the world tilted. I found the recording of the home equity line of credit. It was dated October 16th, 2 days after the alleged deed transfer to Lauren. The amount was for $100,000. Lauren had told me, repeatedly, that the house was free and clear. She had told me the transfer was to protect the asset, but you do not protect an asset by stripping the equity out of it 48 hours later. I looked at the payoff statement filed 6 months after that. The numbers didn't match. Lauren had claimed she used the personal bequest, the $10,000 she gave me, from the estate's liquid cash. But the records showed a refinance occurred 3 months after the funeral. Lauren had taken out a new mortgage on the house, a massive loan of $250,000, to pay off the home equity line and, presumably, to put cash in her pocket. I sat back on my heels, staring at the numbers. $250,000. She hadn't just taken the house. She had leveraged it to the hilt. She had turned our childhood home, the symbol of our parents' hard work, into a giant ATM, and she had done it almost immediately after the funeral. Why? Lauren and her husband, Mark, both had steady jobs. Mark was a regional manager for a hardware chain. Lauren was a school administrator. They weren't rich, but they weren't destitute. Why did they need $250,000 in liquid cash within 90 days of my father's death? The suspicion began to curdle into something darker. It wasn't just greed. Greed is wanting more than you have. This looked like panic. This looked like someone frantically moving money from one bucket to another to keep a ship from sinking. I decided it was time to break the silence. I didn't want to tip my hand. I didn't want her to know I had the notary stamp or the signature discrepancy. I wanted to see what she would volunteer. I wanted to see if she would lie on the record. I drafted an email. I wrote it, deleted it, rewrote it, and let it sit in my drafts folder for 24 hours. I stripped every ounce of emotion out of it. I removed the adjectives. I removed the accusations. Subject: clarification regarding estate documents. Hi, Lauren. I hope you and Mark are well. I am organizing my own financial records for tax purposes and realized I have some gaps regarding the estate settlement. Could you please confirm if there was a home equity line of credit active on the house at the time of Dad's passing? I have a credit inquiry on my report that references it, and I want to make sure I am not liable for anything outstanding. Also, if you could share the closing documents for the transfer, I would appreciate it. I just want to update my files. Thanks. Naomi. I hit send. I expected silence. I expected her to ignore me for a week. The reply came 11 minutes later. Naomi, I do not understand why you are doing this. Why are you doing this to me? We settled this 5 years ago. The house is in my name. You received your bequest. There is no reason for you to be digging into my personal finances or the mortgage on my home. It feels like you are trying to find a way to hurt me because you are still unresolved about Mom and Dad. Please stop harassing me. I am dealing with a lot right now. Lauren, no documents, no denial of the loan, just a pivot to victimhood. Why are you doing this to me? She was scared. I could feel it radiating through the screen. A calm person says, "Here's the paperwork. Sorry for the confusion." A guilty person asks why you are looking. I didn't reply. I printed her email and added it to the pile. A few days later, my phone rang. It was an area code I recognized from home. I answered, expecting a telemarketer. Naomi? Is that you? The voice was thin and reedy. It took me a moment to place it. It was Mr. Henderson, not the lawyer, but old Mr. Henderson who lived across the street from my parents. No relation to the firm. He was 80 years old and spent his days watching the neighborhood from his front porch. Mr. Henderson? I said. Hi, I'm surprised to hear from you. Well, I got your number from Sarah's mother. He said, I heard you were asking around about the house. I stiffened. Word traveled fast in a small town. I'm just trying to clear up some paperwork. I said carefully, I thought you should know. He said, lowering his voice. I didn't say anything at the time because I thought you knew. I thought it was normal. What? I asked. What did you see? It was about a week after the funeral. He said, maybe 2 weeks. You were gone by then. I saw a truck pull up. Not a moving truck. A white van. 2 men got out. They went into the house with Lauren. Okay, I said. Maybe they were contractors? They weren't doing repairs. Naomi? They were carrying boxes out. Lots of them. File boxes. Black trash bags. They filled the van. I gripped the phone. Did you see what was in them? No, he said. But it looked like a clean-out. You know? Like when the bank takes a place. But Lauren was there, directing them. She looked frantic. Naomi, She was tossing things into the bags herself. It just seemed odd. Usually, you girls would go through that stuff together. Keepsakes. Papers. Thank you. Mr. Henderson, I said, my voice trembling. Thank you for telling me. I hung up and stared at the wall. Estate clean-out. That was why the war letters were missing. That was why the photo album was gone. Lauren hadn't just curated the box she gave me. She had purged the house. She had hired strangers to haul away 50 years of our parents' lives in black trash bags. Why? You do not throw away family photos unless you are heartless, or unless you are hiding something. You do not shred file boxes unless there is paper inside that contradicts your story. She had sanitized the crime scene. She had removed the bank statements, the overdue notices, the collection letters, anything that would have shown me the true state of their finances before she took over. I needed a lawyer, a real one. Not a consumer protection guy, but a probate shark. I found Ms. Vance in a high-rise downtown. She cost $400 an hour, and I had to dip into my meager retirement savings to pay the retainer. She was sharp, unsentimental, and wore glasses that looked like they could cut glass. I laid it all out for her, the timeline, the credit report, the forged signature on the waiver, the notary stamp from the shipping store, the witness account of the clean-out. Ms. Vance listened, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she tapped her pen on the desk. You have a case, she said. The signature discrepancy is the smoking gun. If we can prove you were out of state, and with the flight records and location data, we can... Then the waiver is void. If the waiver is void, the probate was closed improperly. We can petition to reopen the estate, but, she added, looking me dead in the eye, you need to understand what you are starting. I am starting a correction. I said, you are starting a war, she corrected. This is fraud. Naomi, if we pursue this, we are accusing your sister of felony forgery and theft. We are saying she stole the house. She did steal the house. I said, yes, but family courts are messy, and small towns are messier. Lauren will not roll over. She will attack your character. She will say you authorized it verbally and then forgot. She will say you are mentally unstable. She will say you are doing this for money. I do not care about the money. I said, Ms. Vance sighed. Everyone says that. But when the legal fees hit $20,000, you will care about the money. My advice? We send a demand letter. We ask for a full accounting. We challenge the filings. But we do it calmly. We do not call the police yet. We give her a chance to explain, even though we know she can't. We let her trap herself. I agreed. We drafted the letter. That night, I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. The internal struggle was not a sharp pain anymore. It was a dull, heavy ache. Lauren was the only person left in the world who remembered my childhood. She was the only one who knew how Dad's voice sounded when he was reading the Sunday paper. She was the only one who knew the smell of Mom's perfume. If I did this, if I really pushed this button, I was severing that tie forever. I was making myself an orphan in the truest sense. There would be no reconciliation at Christmas. There would be no shared nostalgia when we were old. But then I thought about the trash bags. I thought about the war letters, written by a terrified young man in a trench, tossed into a landfill by a daughter who cared more about covering her tracks than preserving his memory. I couldn't let the lie define my life. I couldn't let her rewrite history to make me the villain and herself the martyr. The demand letter went out on a Monday. The backlash hit on Wednesday. My phone started buzzing while I was at work. I looked down and saw a text from my Aunt Carol. Carol was my father's sister. She had always been distant, but cordial. Naomi, I just got off the phone with Lauren. I am disgusted. After everything that poor girl has done to save that house. You are trying to take it away from her? You should be ashamed. I didn't reply. Then came a message from my cousin Mike. Real classy. Naomi, waiting 5 years until the market goes up to try and cash out? Lauren told us you were having money trouble, but suing your own sister is a new low. Then another, from a second cousin I hadn't seen in a decade. Leave Lauren alone. She took care of them while you were gone. Lauren was spinning the narrative. She had gotten the letter from Ms. Vance. and she had immediately hit the panic button. She was calling everyone in the family tree, sobbing, telling them that greedy, unstable Naomi was trying to evict her, trying to steal the home she had worked so hard to keep. She was using the exact weapon Dr. Evans had identified in therapy: shame. She was trying to shame me into silence. I sat in my cubicle, my hands shaking. I wanted to scream. I wanted to post the credit report on Facebook. I wanted to upload the flight records and the forged waiver and caption it. She lied. I wanted to fight fire with fire. But Ms. Vance's voice was in my head. Be ready for character attacks. Do not engage. If I argued, I looked defensive. If I screamed, I looked unstable. I took a deep breath. I turned my phone over. I did not post online. I did not reply to Aunt Carol or Cousin Mike. I did not call Lauren. Instead, I wrote letters. I wrote a calm, factual response to Aunt Carol. I printed it on nice paper. Dear Aunt Carol, I understand Lauren is upset. I am not trying to take the house. I recently discovered that my name was used on a loan application without my consent, and that documents were notarized in my name while I was out of the state. I am simply asking for a legal accounting to clear up these discrepancies. I am sure you agree that the truth is important. Love, Naomi. I sent the same letter to Mike. I didn't defend myself against the greed accusations. I just pointed to the discrepancy. My name was used. I wasn't there. It was a risky strategy. It relied on them being rational, which family members rarely are in a crisis, but slowly, the silence started to work. When you scream at someone, they scream back. When you whisper a fact, they have to lean in to hear it. A week later, I got a text from Mike. Wait, you were out of state? Lauren said you signed the papers at the kitchen table. I sent him a screenshot of my flight itinerary. He didn't reply, but the angry messages stopped. The doubt was creeping in. Lauren's frantic emotional appeals were hitting a wall of cold, hard documentation. She was crying about legacy and heartbreak, and I was talking about notary logs and flight times. But the final piece of the puzzle, the piece that changed everything, didn't come from the family. It came from the hospital. I had requested my mother's medical billing records as part of the probate inquiry. Since I was a legal heir, and we were challenging the administrator, the hospital released them to Ms. Vance. I sat in her office, looking at the billing summary. Lauren had told everyone that Mom's insurance covered everything. She had told me, specifically, the medical bills were zero. Naomi, we were lucky. The paper in front of me told a different story. My mother's insurance had a lifetime cap. She had hit it 3 weeks before she died. There were unpaid balances totaling $80,000, and then I saw the payment plan. It was dated October 18th, 2 days before she died. A lump sum payment of $75,000 had been made to the hospital. The source of the funds was listed as a cashier's check from First National Bank. I looked at the HELOC withdrawal again. $75,000 drawn on October 18th. The heir left the room. Lauren hadn't stolen the money to buy a boat. She hadn't stolen it to go on vacation. She had stolen the equity in the house to pay the hospital bills that were threatening to bankrupt the estate before Mom even died. She had panicked. My parents were dying. The bills were mounting, and the insurance had stopped paying. Lauren, the one in charge, the one who managed everything, had been drowning. She couldn't admit to me that she had let the finances spiral. She couldn't admit to Dad that they were broke. So she forged my signature. She transferred the deed to herself so she could open the credit line. She drained the house to pay the doctors. And then, when Dad died and the income stopped, she refinanced the house to cover the hole she had dug. She buried the debt under a new mortgage. She kicked me out not because she hated me, but because she couldn't afford me. She couldn't afford to split the asset. She needed every cent of the house's value to keep the creditors at bay and maintain the illusion that she had handled it perfectly. My exclusion wasn't about malice. It was about collateral damage. I was the obstacle she had to remove to keep her secret. I looked at the hospital bill, feeling a complicated grief wash over me. It didn't make what she did right. It was still fraud. It was still theft. She had still lied to me for 5 years. gaslighting me into believing I was the irresponsible one, while she was frantically juggling five-figure debts. But it changed the texture of the hate. It wasn't a villain plotting in a dark room. It was a terrified woman making a catastrophic series of choices to save face. Ms. Vance looked at me. Does this change anything? I looked at the numbers. I looked at the ruin of my family finances. No, I said quietly. It explains everything, but it excuses nothing. She didn't trust me enough to tell me. She decided I was a liability, not a sister. She decided to break the law rather than ask for help. I stood up. File the petition. I said, I want the accounting. I want her to say it out loud. I walked out of the office. The city was gray and loud, indifferent to my small tragedy. I felt older than my 38 years. I wasn't fighting for the house anymore. I was fighting for the reality of what had happened. I was fighting to pop the blister so the wound could finally, actually heal. Lauren had tried to protect the myth of the perfect family by destroying the actual family. Now, I was going to use the debris to build something true. The filing process was not a cinematic event. There was no dramatic music swelling as I walked up the courthouse steps. No slow-motion montage of justice being served. It was a Tuesday morning, raining a cold, miserable drizzle, and I was standing in line at the probate clerk's window behind a man arguing about a zoning permit for a shed. I had paid Ms. Vance a retainer of $5,000 to draft the petition to reopen estate based on newly discovered assets and fraud. But I insisted on filing the initial request myself to save on her hourly rate for the courier service. It was a petty economy, born of the fact that my savings account was now hovering dangerously close to zero. I handed the packet to the clerk. She didn't look up. She stamped it 3 times, thump, 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 and slid the carbon copy back to me. That will be $250 for the filing fee, she said. I wrote the check. My hand shook. Just a little. That was it. I had officially accused my sister of fraud. I had officially declared war. I walked back to my car, sat in the driver's seat, and waited for the panic attack to pass. It felt less like a victory and more like I had just pulled the pin on a grenade in a crowded room. The summons was served to Lauren 3 days later. I expected her to call screaming. I expected her to lawyer up immediately and bury me in paper. Instead, I got a text message. Meet me. Sunday. 11 a.m. The Midway Diner. Just us. Please. I forwarded the text to Ms. Vance. Do not agree to anything, she replied. Listen only. If she tries to get you to sign something, leave. I arrived at the diner at 10:45. I wanted to be seated first. I wanted to control the geography of the table. I chose a booth in the corner, with my back to the wall, watching the door. Lauren arrived at exactly 11 o'clock. She looked tired. That was my first thought. The glossy, impregnable armor she had worn at the funeral was cracked. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail that looked 2 days old. Her coat was buttoned wrong at the top, but she was carrying a thick, black 3-ring binder, clutching it to her chest like a shield. She slid into the booth opposite me. She didn't say hello. She placed the binder on the table between us. You look good. Naomi, she said. Her voice was brittle. You look like city life suits you. I am doing okay, I said. She signaled the waitress and ordered a coffee. Black. I had a water. Why did you file it? She asked. She didn't shout. She looked at me with a terrifyingly genuine expression of hurt. Why couldn't we just talk about this? I tried to talk to you. Lauren, I said, I asked for the documents. I asked about the loan. You told me I was manic. You told me to stop harassing you. Because you were harassing me, she hissed, leaning over the table. You were digging up things that were settled years ago. You were upsetting Aunt Carol. You were making everyone think I stole from our parents. I looked at the binder. Did you? I asked. Lauren recoiled as if I had slapped her. I saved this family, she said. Her voice shook with a potent mix of rage and martyrdom. I was the one there every day. Naomi. I was the one driving Mom to dialysis before the end. I was the one sitting with Dad while he cried about the bills. You were 2 states away living your best life. You have no idea what it took to keep the lights on. I know about the hospital bills, I said quietly. I know about the $80,000. I know you used the house to pay it. She froze. Her eyes darted to the side, then back to me. So you know? She said, her voice dropping. Then you know why I did it. The insurance cap hit. They were going to stop treatment. Mom was terrified. Dad was paralyzed. He couldn't make a decision. Someone had to do something. I do not dispute that the money was needed. Lauren, I said, I dispute how you got it. I dispute that you forged my name to do it. Lauren opened the binder. She flipped through tabs. Colored, organized, meticulous. She pulled out a spreadsheet. Look at this, she said. This is every penny. Every penny from the equity line went to the hospital or the funeral home. I didn't take a vacation. I didn't buy a car. I paid their debts. And when Dad died, the income stopped. But the mortgage payment on that equity line didn't. I had to refinance to lower the monthly payment, or the bank was going to foreclose. I did it to save the house. She pushed the paper toward me. See? It balances. I am not a thief. I looked at the spreadsheet. It was impressive. It was a masterpiece of self-justification, but it was missing the point. The math works. Lauren, I said, I believe you paid the bills, but you are missing the document that matters. Which one? She demanded. The waiver. I said, the one you filed with the probate court. The one that says I consented to all of this. She stiffened. That was a formality. Dad wanted it done quickly. He didn't want the state taking a cut. I pulled a piece of paper from my bag. It wasn't a spreadsheet. It was a single sheet. A photocopy of the waiver with the notary stamp. This was signed on October 14th. I said, Lauren stared at it. Yes, so? So on October 14th, I was in Denver. I said, I put a copy of my flight itinerary on the table next to the waiver. I flew out of O'Hare at 10 in the morning. This document was notarized at the Pack and Ship on 4th Street at 2 in the afternoon. Lauren didn't move. She didn't blink. I was not in the state. Lauren, I continued, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. I did not sign this. You signed it, or you got someone else to sign it, and then you got Jennifer Halloway to stamp it. That is forgery. That is fraud. Lauren closed her eyes. She took a long, shuddering breath. When she opened them, the pity was gone. The sisterly concern was gone. There was only a cold, hard-cornered animal. It doesn't matter, she said. It matters to the court. I said, it doesn't matter because Dad knew, she snapped. The volume of her voice made the couple in the next booth look over. She lowered her voice to a furious whisper. Dad knew. Naomi. He was right there. He was in the car when I went into the shipping store. He couldn't walk that far, so he waited in the passenger seat. He knew I was going in to sign your name. I felt a cold shock wash over me. Dad? He was desperate, Lauren said, tears finally spilling over, hot and angry. He was drowning. Naomi. He looked at me and said, just handle it. Lauren, do whatever you have to do. Just do not let them take the house. Do not let your mother die in a charity ward. He made me promise. He made me do it. I sat back, stunned. My father. The man who taught me that a handshake was a contract. The man who returned a cashier gave him an extra $1 in change. He had sat in the car while his eldest daughter committed a felony. He didn't want you involved, Lauren said, wiping her face aggressively. He said, Naomi has her own life. She is soft. She will worry. She will want to discuss it. We do not have time to discuss it. So he told me to handle you, handle me. The words hung in the air between us, smelling of stale coffee and betrayal. They hadn't just excluded me because I was absent. They had excluded me because they thought I was weak. They thought I would slow them down with my questions, with my ethics, with my grief. They needed a soldier, not a daughter. And Lauren was the soldier. It wasn't just you, Lauren said, closing the binder. It was them. It was all of us. We did what we had to do. And now you are trying to send me to jail for saving our parents' dignity. I looked at her. I saw the fear beneath the anger. She truly believed she was the hero of this story. She believed the ends justified the means. But they didn't. You didn't save their dignity. Lauren, I said softly, you bought it with a lie, and you made me pay for it. You kicked me out of my own home to cover up a crime you committed with our father. That isn't dignity. That is shame. Lauren stood up. She picked up her binder. You are going to drop this, she said, or I swear to God. Naomi, I will ruin you. I will tell everyone what you are really like. I will tell them you abandoned us. I will show them the emails where you refused to come home for Christmas 3 years ago. I will paint a picture of you so ugly you will never be able to show your face in this town again. She threw a $20 bill on the table. And the house? She said. You will never get the house. I will burn it down before I let you take it. She walked out. I sat there for 20 minutes. I drank my water. I watched the rain streak the window. I realized then that the villain wasn't Lauren. The villain was the silence. The villain was the terrifying, crushing weight of American medical debt and the way it turned good families into criminals. My parents had been scared to death, and fear makes people do terrible things. But understanding the motive didn't erase the crime, and it didn't give me back my 5 years. I went back to Ms. Vance. We need a handwriting expert. I said. She nodded. I know a guy. He is expensive, but he is the best. The report came back 2 weeks later. It was dry, clinical, and devastating. Document examination report. Estate of Robert Patterson, analyst, Dr. Arthur P. Finch, certified questioned document examiner. Conclusion. It is the professional opinion of this examiner, with a high degree of certainty, that the questioned signature on the waiver of notice is not the genuine signature of Naomi Patterson. Significant tremors, pen lifts, and letter formation discrepancies indicate a simulation attempt. It wasn't a smoking gun, it was a nuclear warhead. I sent a copy to Lauren's attorney. She had finally hired one, a local guy named Mr. Cobb, who usually handled DUIs. The response was immediate. But it wasn't a settlement offer, it was a court summons. Petition for order of protection. Petitioner, Lauren Miller. Respondent, Naomi Patterson. Allegations. Respondent has engaged in a pattern of harassment, stalking, and emotional abuse. Respondent has sent threatening letters, trespassed on petitioner's property, and is exhibiting signs of mental instability that cause petitioner to fear for her safety. She was doing exactly what she promised. She was weaponizing the legal system to paint me as the crazy sister. Then the whispers started. My friend Sarah called me. Naomi, she said, sounding awkward. I ran into Lauren at the grocery store. She told me you are having a breakdown. She said you are off your meds and imagining things. She said you threatened Mark. I closed my eyes. I didn't have meds. I had never threatened Mark. She is lying. Sarah. I said, I know, Sarah said. But she sounded unsure, but she was crying. Naomi. She seemed really scared. People are talking. I hung up. I felt dirty. I felt like I was covered in a film of slime that I couldn't wash off. I brought the protection order to therapy. I sat in Dr. Evans' office and shook. She is winning. I said, she is rewriting reality again. Everyone believes her because she is the one crying in the grocery store. I am just the cold, distant sister with the lawyer. Doctor. Evans looked at me. Naomi. She said, you are fighting a narcissist who is cornered. This is what they do. They project. She is accusing you of being unstable because she is the one who is unstable. She is accusing you of harassment because she feels harassed by the truth. But it hurts, I whispered. Of course it hurts, she said. It is a betrayal. But you have something she doesn't have. What? You have the truth. And the truth has a funny way of outlasting the drama. You just have to hold on. Do not react. Do not feed the fire. Be the rock the water breaks around. I tried to be the rock, but the rock was eroding. My bank account was empty. I was putting legal fees on credit cards. I was waking up at 3 a.m. with my heart racing. Ms. Vance called me in for a reality check meeting. We have the handwriting report. She said, we have the flight records. We have the hospital bills showing the motive. If we go to trial, we will win on the fraud count. Great, I said. So let's go to trial. Ms. Vance took off her glasses. Naomi, listen to me. Winning the fraud count doesn't mean you get the house in a ticker tape parade. What does it mean? It means the judge will void the transfer. The house will go back into the estate. The estate will be reopened, but since the house is now encumbered by a $250,000 mortgage that Lauren took out, the asset is underwater. I stared at her. Underwater? The house is worth maybe $300,000 in this market, she said. The mortgage is $250,000, plus the unpaid contractor liens, plus the legal fees for the estate. If we force a sale, after the bank gets paid, there might be $20,000 left. Split 2 ways, $10,000. I said, the same amount she gave me in the beginning. Ms. Vance nodded. Maybe less. And Lauren will be liable for the fraud. Yes. She could face criminal charges if the DA picks it up, but the DA hates family disputes. They usually plead these out. She might get probation. She might get a fine. So I spend $50,000 on legal fees to get $10,000 and put my sister on probation? That is the likely outcome. Ms. Vance said, this is a Pyrrhic victory. Naomi, you burned the village to save it. I went home. I sat on my balcony and looked at the city lights. I thought about the house. I thought about the porch where I learned to read. I thought about the kitchen where I learned to bake. If I continued, the house would be sold. Strangers would live there. They would paint over the pencil marks on the door frame that marked my height. The bank would take the money. Lauren would be a felon. I would be right. But I would still be alone. I realized then that I didn't want the house. Not the wood and the brick. That house was gone. It was haunted by the ghosts of my parents' desperation and my sister's betrayal. I wanted something else. I wanted my history back. I called Miss Vance the next morning. I want to offer a settlement. I said. She sounded relieved. Okay, what is the number? No number. I said, I do not want money. Ms. Vance paused. You don't? No. Here is what I want. I listed them. 1. A full admission of the facts, signed by Lauren, stating that the waiver was forged and the accounting was incomplete. It doesn't have to be filed publicly if she agrees to the other terms. But I want it for my records. 2. Access to the house for 48 hours, unsupervised. 3. Possession of specific items. Dad's war letters, the red photo album, Mom's handwritten recipe book, the quilt from the guest room, the grandfather clock. 4. Lauren assumes all debt on the property and removes my name from any and all liability regarding the contractor liens. Ms. Vance was silent for a moment. That is it? She asked. You are walking away from the equity? There is no equity. I said, you told me that. It is a debt trap. Let her keep the mortgage. Let her keep the house she stole. I just want my life back. We sent the offer. Lauren's lawyer called back within the hour. He sounded stunned. He said Lauren was considering it. I knew she would take it. It saved her from prison. It saved her from public humiliation. It let her keep the house, which was the only thing she cared about, the visible symbol of her status. But for me, it was a different kind of victory. I wasn't fighting for the asset anymore. I was fighting for the truth. 2 days later, Lauren agreed. We met at her lawyer's office to sign the papers. The atmosphere was frigid. Lauren wouldn't look at me. She sat with her arms crossed, staring at the wall. I signed the settlement agreement. Then, I slid a separate piece of paper across the table. The admission of facts. Lauren picked it up. She read it. Her face turned red. I have to sign this? She asked her lawyer. If you want the settlement, he said. It stays private. Lauren, unless you breach the agreement. She picked up the pen. Her hand shook. A real tremor this time, not a performance. She signed it. She pushed it back to me. I picked it up. I looked at her signature. It was jagged, angry. Thank you, I said. She stood up. You can come by on Saturday for your junk. I will be out. Mark will let you in. She walked to the door, then stopped. She turned back to look at me. You know, she said, her voice dripping with venom. Mom and Dad would be ashamed of you, dragging this through the mud." I looked at the document in my hand. The document where she admitted to forgery. The document that proved Dad was terrified. Not disappointed. "No. Lauren," I said calmly, "they were ashamed of themselves, and you helped them hide it. I am the only one who isn't hiding anymore." She slammed the door. I walked out into the sunshine. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt heavy. But it was a clean heaviness. It was the weight of the truth, and for the first time in 5 years. I was strong enough to carry it. I had one more thing to do. I had to go back to the house. I had to face the ghosts one last time and retrieve the pieces of my soul she hadn't managed to throw away. I got in my car and turned toward Maple Street. The settlement agreement we signed in the lawyer's office felt like an ending, but in the eyes of the law, it was only a confession. You cannot simply undo 5 years of probate fraud with a private contract and a handshake. To reopen the estate, to correct the title, and to formalize the transfer of debts. We had to go before a judge. I thought it would be a formality. Ms. Vance, my attorney, had warned me that judges often rubber-stamped these things to clear their dockets, but Judge Reynolds was not a rubber-stamp kind of man. He was a stickler for process, a man who read the footnotes, and when he saw the petition to reopen the estate based on irregularities in the original waiver, he did not just sign it, he called a hearing. We sat in courtroom 3B on a Tuesday morning. The air conditioning was humming a low, aggressive drone that seemed to vibrate in my teeth. Lauren sat at the table to my left, flanked by her DUI lawyer, Mr. Cobb. She was wearing a beige suit that washed her out, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked composed, but her hands were gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were the color of old bone. I sat with Ms. Vance. Behind us, in the gallery, sat Aunt Carol and Cousin Mike. They had come to see the spectacle. They had come. I suspected, to see Lauren finally put me in my place. They still believed the narrative that I was the greedy interloper, dragging the family name through the mud for a payout. Judge Reynolds adjusted his glasses and looked down at the file. He didn't look at us. He looked at the paper. "I have reviewed the petition," he said, his voice dry as dust, "and I have reviewed the proposed consent order, but I have some questions regarding the timeline of the original filing." He looked up then, his gaze landing squarely on Lauren. "Ms. Miller," he said, "you served as the independent administrator 5 years ago. You filed an affidavit stating that all assets were distributed and all debts paid. Yet this petition states there was an outstanding home equity line of credit in the amount of $100,000 that was not disclosed to the court. Is that correct?" Lauren stood up. She smoothed her skirt. "Your Honor," she said, her voice steady, practiced. "It was a misunderstanding. The loan was in the process of being refinanced. We considered it personal debt, not estate debt, because the house had already been transferred to you?" The judge interrupted. "Yes, Your Honor. On October 14th? The judge asked. "Yes, the same day the waiver of notice was allegedly signed by your sister?" Lauren hesitated. "Yes." The judge turned a page. He looked at me. "Ms. Patterson," he said, "you are claiming you did not sign that waiver." I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but my head was clear. "That is correct, Your Honor." The judge looked at me over his spectacles. "You understand that by saying this, you are accusing the previous administrator of filing a false instrument with this court. That is a serious allegation. Are you certain you simply did not forget? Grief can fog the memory." I took a breath. I didn't look at Lauren. I didn't look at Aunt Carol. I looked at the judge. "I am certain, Your Honor." I said plainly, "I was not in the state on October 14th. I was in Denver for work. I have provided my flight records and my credit card statements from that day. I could not have been in the notary's office in Oak Creek. I didn't scream it. I didn't cry. I just stated it as a fact, like I was reading a grocery list." The judge nodded slowly. He looked back at Lauren. "Ms. Miller, do you have any evidence to contradict this? Did your sister fly back for the day?" Lauren's lawyer, Mr. Cobb, stood up. Your Honor, my client maintains that the family was gathering during a time of crisis. Memories are hazy. However, to resolve this matter amicably, my client has agreed to the settlement before you. The judge waved a hand, silencing him. I am not interested in your settlement yet. Mr. Cobb, I am interested in the integrity of my court. If a waiver was forged, the entire probate was void from the start. He looked at the notary log photocopy attached to our evidence file. Jennifer S. Halloway. The judge read, the notary. Then, he did something unexpected. He looked at the bailiff. Is Ms. Halloway here? We subpoenaed her logbook. Did we not? Ms. Vance leaned over to me. We subpoenaed the book. She whispered, but we didn't expect him to call her. The door opened, and a woman I didn't recognize walked in. She was clutching a ledger. She looked terrified. The judge didn't put her on the stand immediately. He just asked for the book. He flipped through it. He stopped at a page. Ms. Patterson, he said to me, you say you were in Denver. Yes, Your Honor. The judge looked at the log. Then he looked at Lauren. Ms. Miller, he said, the entry for this notarization lists the signer as Naomi Patterson, but the ID verification column is blank, and the address listed for the signer is not Ms. Patterson's address in the city. It is the address of Oak Creek General Hospital. The room went silent. Why would the notary list the hospital as the signer's address? The judge asked, unless the notarization took place there? Lauren stayed silent. Her face was turning a pale, sickly gray. Ms. Vance stood up. Your Honor, if I may, we have recently discovered that Ms. Halloway, in addition to her work at the shipping store, was employed part-time as a patient advocate liaison at Oak Creek General, a role that often interfaces with families handling discharge planning, and, Ms. Vance continued, glancing at a paper in her hand, corporate records show that Ms. Halloway is also listed as the registered agent for a defunct LLC called Miller Medical Supply, a company registered to Mark Miller. I turned to look at Lauren. Mark, her husband. I had missed it. In all my digging, I had focused on Lauren. I hadn't looked at Mark. Mark knew the notary. Mark had a business relationship with her. The judge looked at Lauren. Ms. Miller, did your husband arrange for this notarization? Lauren's control evaporated. It wasn't a slow leak. It was a dam breaking. She slumped against the table, her posture collapsing in on itself. He was trying to help, she whispered. It was barely audible. Speak up, the judge commanded. He was trying to help, she cried out, her voice cracking, raw and desperate. We were drowning. Your Honor, you do not understand. The bills were coming in every day. The hospital was threatening to discharge Mom because the insurance capped out. We needed the money from the house to pay the deposit for the nursing facility. We couldn't wait for probate. We couldn't wait for Naomi to come back and ask a million questions and delay everything. She turned to me, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup, stripping away the mask of the competent older sister. You were not here. Naomi, you were gone. We were here watching them die. And Mark said he knew a girl who could stamp the paper so we could get the line of credit. He said it was just a shortcut. He said it was what Dad wanted. She looked at the judge, pleading now. The house wasn't a prize. Your Honor, it was a plug. It was the only thing stopping us from losing everything. We refinanced it 3 times. We used every dime to pay the medical debt, and then the credit cards we maxed out to pay for the funeral. I do not have the money. I never had the money. It is all gone. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. It wasn't malice. It was panic. It was the banal, terrifying reality of the American healthcare system crashing into a family that didn't have the cash to survive it. Mark and Lauren had broken the law not to buy a yacht, but to pay for a nursing home. But they had sacrificed me to do it. They had stolen my name, my credit, and my inheritance because they deemed me expendable. The judge sat back in his chair. He looked less angry now, and more weary. Ms. Miller, he said quietly, I understand desperation, but this court cannot function if people treat the law as a suggestion. You forged a signature, you defrauded a lender, and you deprived your sister of her legal right to be involved in her parents' estate. He picked up his gavel. I am ordering a full forensic accounting of the estate. Going back 5 years, I want to see every transaction. If there are funds missing that were not used for the decedent's care, you will be held personally liable. He looked at me, and Ms. Patterson, he said, the settlement you proposed, asking for the personal items and leaving the property with Ms. Miller? Yes, Your Honor. The judge sighed. You are a generous woman, because frankly, I could order the house sold today to pay the legal fees, but I will allow the settlement to stand, pending the accounting. He looked at Lauren one last time. You are lucky your sister wants peace more than she wants justice, Ms. Miller, because if this were a criminal court, you would be leaving in handcuffs. He banged the gavel. Adjourned. The sound rang in the courtroom like a gunshot. Lauren didn't move. She sat with her head in her hands, weeping silently. Mr. Cobb patted her shoulder awkwardly and started packing up his briefcase. I stood up. I felt hollowed out. I walked toward the exit. In the hallway, Aunt Carol and Cousin Mike were standing by the water fountain. They looked shell-shocked. They had heard it all. They had heard the judge call it fraud. They had heard Lauren admit to the forgery. They had heard the truth about the money. Carol looked at me. Her face was pale. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it. She didn't know what to say. There was no script for this. The villain wasn't the villain anymore. And the victim wasn't the victim. We were just a mess. Naomi, Mike said, his voice quiet. We didn't know. Lauren told us. It is okay. Mike, I said, I was too tired to accept an apology, and too tired to demand one. It is over. I walked past them. I realized then that public validation, the thing I had craved for 5 years, the desire for everyone to say Naomi was right, didn't fix anything. It didn't heal the wound. It just exposed it to the air. They knew the truth now. But I was still walking out of the courthouse alone. Ms. Vance met me in the lobby. She was holding a cardboard box. This was given to Mr. Cobb this morning, she said. The items from the settlement list. I took the box. It was heavy. I sat on a bench outside the courthouse and opened it. The red photo album was there. The cover was worn, the magnetic pages losing their stickiness. I flipped it open. There was my mother's handwriting. Naomi's First Steps, 1994. The recipe book was there, smelling of vanilla and old paper. But the letters? I dug to the bottom. There was a small bundle of envelopes tied with string, my father's war letters. I counted them. 12. There had been 50. I looked at Ms. Vance. This isn't all of them, I said. She looked at me with a sad, professional sympathy. It is likely all that is left. Naomi, if there was a clean-out, things get lost. Things get thrown away. I held the 12 letters. I felt a sharp, stinging grief. The other 38 were gone. They were rotting in a landfill somewhere, dissolved by rain and time, lost because my sister was in a hurry to hide alone. I realized then that you cannot recover everything. Justice is not a time machine. It cannot bring back the years, and it cannot bring back the lost pieces of history. You get what you get. You get the scraps. I put the letters back in the box. I stood up. Thank you. Ms. Vance, I said, for everything. She shook my hand. Take care of yourself. Naomi. I walked to my car. I put the box in the passenger seat. It looked small there. I had one last stop to make. I drove to Maple Street. I didn't park in the driveway. I parked across the street, near Mr. Henderson's house. I got out and stood on the sidewalk. The house looked the same, and yet entirely different. The white paint was a little grayer. The oak tree in the front yard needed pruning. The curtains were drawn tight, sealing the secrets inside. I knew Lauren was probably on her way back there now. I knew she would walk into that house, terrified of the mortgage payments, terrified of the forensic accounting, terrified of the neighbors staring. She had the house. Yes, she had the title. But it wasn't a home anymore. It was a prison she had built for herself. Brick by brick, lie by lie. I looked at the porch where I used to sit and wait for the school bus. I looked at the window of my old bedroom. I tried to feel angry. I tried to feel the rage that had fueled me for 5 years. But it was gone, burned up in the atmosphere of the courtroom. All I felt was a strange, quiet clarity. The house was just wood and glass. It wasn't my parents. My parents were in the recipe book in the passenger seat. They were in the 12 letters I had saved. They were in the way I laughed, and the way I worked, and the way I had told the truth even when it cost me. Lauren had the shell. I had the soul. I thought about going to the door. I had the right, per the settlement, to enter for 48 hours. I could walk in there, walk through the rooms, haunt her one last time. But what was the point? There was nothing in there for me. The furniture was different. The air was different. The love that had built that house had evaporated the moment they signed those papers out of fear. I looked at the house one last time. I memorized the line of the roof against the gray sky. "Goodbye," I whispered. I turned around and walked back to my car. I didn't start the engine immediately. I sat there, looking at the box of recovered items. I had a choice now. The judge had ordered the accounting. When it came back, it would show the extent of the financial damage. I could use it to force a sale. I could use it to push for criminal charges. I could spend the next 5 years of my life ensuring that Lauren paid for every single cent she misappropriated. I could crush her, or I could drive away. I could take these 12 letters in this recipe book, go back to my apartment in the city, and finish the life I had started building. I could let the accounting happen, let the chips fall where they may, but step out of the ring. I looked at the road stretching out in front of me. It led to the highway. It led away from Oak Creek. It led to a place where I wasn't Naomi the victim, or Naomi the plaintiff. I put the car in gear. Revenge is a heavy stone to carry. It breaks your back while you are trying to throw it. I decided to set it down. I didn't cash the check 5 years ago, but I was cashing out now, not for money, for peace. I pulled away from the curb. Leaving 42 Maple Street in the rearview mirror, I watched it shrink until it was just a white dot, and then, finally, nothing at all. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was a journey of betrayal, truth, and the complicated reality of what happens when money and family mix. I would love to know what you would have done in Naomi's shoes. Would you have forced the sale, or did she make the right choice to walk away? Let me know in the comments below. And please tell me where you are listening from. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories for more dramas that explore the darker side of human relationships. Don't forget to like and share your thoughts in English. Stay tuned for the next episode.